Hello, good evening, and welcome to the business segment on Joy News Prime with me, Beverly Broohm. Coming up tonight, the International Monetary Fund lowers Ghana's growth rate to 1.6% for this year, citing the negative impact of global challenges. We'll hear from a senior finance lecturer. Also, a critical week for Ghana. That's the assertion of economist Professor Godfred Bokpin, who says that the ongoing IMF World Bank spring meeting in Washington should bring some clarity on Ghana's quest for support from the Bretton Woods institution.
Our bilateral, multilateral are all gathering in Washington, and therefore we will seek some level of clarity in terms of the way forward. But certainly this month can't be possible for us to have a program.
And Beverly Broohm, we have more coming up. Please stay. Thanks for choosing us. Now, the IMF has lowered Ghana's growth rate to 1.6% for this year. This is lower compared to the 2.8% projected by the government of Ghana in the 2023 budget. My colleague George Riafe has more in this report from Washington, D.C., where the annual IMF World Bank spring meeting is ongoing.
Was captured in the IMF's World Economic Outlook report released in Washington, D.C., USA, on the sidelines of the ongoing annual IMF World Bank spring meetings. The IMF in the report noted that the slow growth was based on some development in the global economy, and how that will impact negatively on Ghana for this year. Now, this projection by the IMF is lower than government's own 2.8% forecast, as captured in its 2023 budget presented by the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta. The development might show that the IMF is not that confident about growth picking up strongly for this year compared to what Ghana recorded in 2022. The projection is similar to the World Bank as captured in its Africa Pulse report, which was released last week, that also forecast a growth rate of 1.8% ending 2023. If the IMF's projection is anything to go by, then there could be implications for government in terms of its economic projections for this year, especially when it comes to revenue for 2023.
Now, joining me via Zoom for more on this development is senior finance lecturer at the University of Cape Coast, Seyoram Kawo. Thank you so much, Seyoram, for your time here. What do you make of the reduction in Ghana's growth rate to 1.6% by the IMF from the earlier projection of 2.8% in its April 2023 World Economic Outlook?
All right, thank you very much. The projection as put out by IMF and then World Bank between 1.6 and 1.8 as against 2.8 by the government of Ghana is just telling us that the global economic turn down is affecting us as a country and that we are in for difficult times. And we could say this from what happened in the latter part of last year, where we have a lot of issues in our macroeconomic environment, where exchange rates have been fluctuating over time, interest rates have gone up, and the inflation has been around 50 or 52%. And so this projection is just telling us that there is a need for us to sit up, readjust, and make sure that we brace ourselves for difficult times in the future.
But what are the implications on investor confidence and the country's engagement with its external creditors?
Yeah, fortunately for us, this is not only affecting Ghana, it's affecting the global economy and then the sub-Saharan Africa. And so the external debt, external creditors that we have know the situation that is currently affecting the country and the global economy. And for that reason, we only have to give them the assurance of the steps that we are taking to ensure that we come out of this difficult situation. And that is one of the situations that is making it very difficult for us to get the program very handy. They want to scrutinize all the programs and plans that we put out there to ensure that whatever funds that they are making available for us will be used in turning the Ghanaian economy around. Let us remember that this is not the first time that we are going to IMF, the 17th time. And for that reason, always going back to the same people, asking them to cancel your debt, they are going to be very tough on us. Hence, the need for us to get some assurances from them. And for us to get those assurances, there is also the need for us to ensure that we put out credible programs that will match what they want to see. They wouldn't want the economy to go down because we are global partners with the world. And so they would want to ensure that government is on track. They put out plans that will ensure that we move forward. Now, this reduction is going to affect revenue generation in the country. Employment situations will be much tougher as we move on.
Well, the fund has predicted a 2.9 expansion of the economy in 2024. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so once we are able to go through the debt exchange program, and then we go through the external creditors, which will culminate into us getting the IMF bailout, they are going to ensure that credible things are done, policies are credible, investor confidence is restored into the economy, where we would be able to get into the international financial market to get more funds to run the businesses that we are doing. In that way, we should be able to go through successfully. We've always been saying that it's going to be difficult times for us. It shouldn't be business as usual at all times. And so the government and all individuals, Ghanaians, must brace up for this difficult times that we are going to go through. And once we are able to get the funds, things will turn around. And once they turn around, growth will come back.
Thank you so much, Seyram Kawo. He's a senior finance lecturer at the University of Cape Coast. We still stay on the IMF World Bank Spring Meeting. This week is critical for Ghana on its quest for an IMF bailout. That's according to an assertion by economist Professor Godfred Bokpin, who says that the ongoing meeting should bring some clarity on whether or not the country is on the path to securing support from the fund. Now, speaking on the marketplace, he said the gathering of bilateral and multilateral creditors at the meeting should bring some finality to the ongoing debt negotiations.
It's more about government communication. Why am I saying so? When we're doing the domestic debt exchange, because they more or less through coercion, we were trying to create the impression that the banks and financial institutions and individual bondholders needed to sign up quickly, otherwise the economy was collapsing, so that we could get the program by the end of January. It was a strategy to get bondholders to surrender their old bonds for the new ones at considerably lower rates and all of that, because that had been achieved. Then again, when it came to passage of the revenue bills, we packaged it as though we needed to do that, and that was what we needed to do. No. And as you can see, the critical thing now is, and it has been there, is the assurance from bilateral and multilateral. Certainly, if you look at the way things are unfolding, our expectation has been that this week is a critical week for Ghana, because our bilateral, multilateral are all gathering in Washington, and therefore we would seek some level of clarity in terms of the way forward. But certainly this month can't be possible for us to have a program, and therefore we should be looking at maybe middle of May or towards the end of May and all of that, because it's not going to be easy. And remember that it's simply not just helping Ghana and other African countries. The new Scrabble for Africa. Every powerful nation wants a portion of Africa, okay? And all these things are at play, and it's influencing how the discussions are going in terms of the geo-economic fragmentation and geo-global politics playing out between the West and China, Russia, and the rest of them.
Now, capital markets players are worried about the kind of returns they will be gaining amid ongoing negotiations with the International Monetary Fund. According to President of the Ghana Securities Industry Association, Winston Nelson Jr., the industry is concerned about the IMF deal because it presents another layer of confidence which could boost activities on the market positively. Winston Nelson told Joy Business that continuing postponement of the deadline for the agreement with the fund brings some uncertainty onto the capital market.
The key concern is, when is the market going to fully reopen? You know, we had a market that was trading at a certain volume pre this program, and it hasn't gotten there yet. The volumes you trade in a day are less than half what we used to trade the same time a year ago. There has been definitely haircuts on the coupons that people are getting. So there's a lot of uncertainty. Currently, I think our biggest concern is, how is the market going to open and in what form? When is the IMF program going to end? When are we going to complete it? Because it becomes a key line item for us to close, for us to see the way forward. So these are some of the key things that concerns our members. And remember that once volumes are down, businesses are kind of suffering in terms of their revenues. Definitely their revenues would also be down. But you know, in this environment, expenses and costs have actually been rising. So most of the people will be living on, will be having higher costs than their revenues. It is therefore important that the markets open quickly so that we will be able to start at least breaking even, or else we'll be booking losses for a longer period of time.
When you engage the managers of the economy or the leaders of this market, what signal do you get?
Well, we were under the impression the IMF program will be completed shortly. But we have been under that impression for a while. As you know, you are also in the media, so you know, like I also know, there's no clear date. It becomes a target for every month, and we keep going forward. The target keeps moving forward. So the big question is, okay, when are we going to get this thing done? At least we know the domestic is done. When would the external be done? For us to be able to conclude with the IMF, for us to now come back and now start dealing with how we rebuild again.
Moving on, the Bank of Ghana has again justified its financing of the budget post-COVID-19, saying failure to do so will have spelled doom for the economy. Between 2015 and 2020, before COVID-19 struck, the central bank had a policy of zero financing of the budget. However, that changed right after COVID-19, when the government was struggling to raise revenue. Speaking at the University of Ghana's 75th anniversary public lecture on Ghana's economy, the need for a paradigm shift, Director of Research at the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Philip Abrado-Otu, said the Bank of Ghana had no choice but to save the economy from collapse.
From 2015, when we were on the first ECF program from the IMF, we've had strict zero financing memorandum of understanding between the central bank and the Ministry of Finance, and that has been respected from 2015 up until 2020 when COVID struck. And then we had to change the modus operandi. We had to provide some financing to government to deal with the COVID. And then this latest big shock, which Dr. Graham says is the biggest of all shocks, which also came in last year associated with debt, and there was some financing associated with that. But again, why the central bank did what it did at the time. Dr. Graham characterizes this as the biggest shock. And from the central bank's point of view, we realized we needed an economy to protect. So there were choices that had to be made. Should we allow the economy to collapse, or we should stick strictly to issues of fiscal dominance? And then who picks up the pieces after the economy has collapsed? But that financing that we did in 2022 went mainly to deal with investors, both domestic investors whose bonds had matured, and government needed to pay these bonds, and for which government had no resources. We had to step in as the lender of last resort and allow the domestic investors to get their returns. All the amount, 100% of that amount, was due to domestic bonds that had matured, for which we had to step in to save these domestic investors. And that is where the fiscal dominance issue came in. So yes, it came in, but we did that to save domestic investors.
We do some more stories now, and interest rates rose marginally as the government recorded a slight oversubscription of its treasury bill sales. According to the latest auction by the Bank of Ghana, the rising rates are in tandem with a recent policy rate increase by the central bank. The following business desk report has more.
The auction result showed that the yield on the 91-day T-bill went up by 0.31% to 19.69%, whilst that of the 182-day T-bill increased to 22.24% from 21.85% the previous week. The rate on the 364-day T-bill also surged to 26.95%. Some analysts have described the recent increase in the interest rate on the treasury market as not surprising because the current rate do not match the prevailing macroeconomic condition. The policy rate is presently going for 29.5%, while average lending rate hover around 38%. Meanwhile, the government recorded a marginal 6.16% oversubscription of the T-bill sale to the tune of 1.88 billion cedis. It, however, accepted 1.85 billion cedis, more than the targeted amount of 1.76 billion Ghana cedis. Chunk of the bids came from the 91-day T-bills. The government accepted all the bids from the 91-day and the 182-day T-bills. 1.293 billion Ghana cedis and 422 million cedis were obtained from these instruments. However, it accepted 140 million Ghana cedis out of the 167 million tendered for the one-year bill.
Now, Ghana is ranked first in sub-Saharan Africa with the largest electricity access rate. That's according to the World Bank's April 2023 Africa Pulse report. The nation recorded about 81% access to electricity rate in 2021. Here's a report.
Ghana beats African powerhouses such as South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria. In 2015, the country's access to electricity in Africa stood at about 75%. That still placed it number one on the continent. So between 2015 and 2021, the country added a little over 5% power to the electricity access rate. The World Bank's African Pulse report pointed out that the COVID-19 pandemic has had a sharp adverse effect on access to electricity, other than the pandemic eroded gains made in the preceding 5 years. In several countries, it said the number of people without access to electricity grew rapidly between 2020 and 2021, despite progress made prior to the pandemic. However, in Ghana, Kenya, Rwanda, Senegal, and Cote d'Ivoire, the numbers were stable or reduced. Meanwhile, Cote d'Ivoire and Kenya were ranked second and third respectively in sub-Saharan Africa with the biggest electricity access rate.
Well, energy strategist Dr. Isif Suleiman has described the feat as commendable, but advises stakeholders to continue to put in measures for its sustainability.
That is refreshing to hear, especially if you look at the global context where we are coming from. I mean, chalking this milestone is something that we should commend ourselves. we only need to make sure that whatever help us to, come to this far, I mean, we should be able to maintain that or sustain that. What is the global perspective here that I think Ghana is doing well? I mean, if you look at globally, this particular thing sits into what we call the SDG 7, that is Sustainable Development Goal 7, where it is stipulated that we need to have access to electricity and clean energy, clean sources of energy. Now, globally, as we speak now, we still have about 0.8 billion, specifically 770 million, having zero access to electricity at all as we speak now. So, and that's a global figure. And out of this figure, about 85% is coming from African continent. And so if we look at the fact that from 2010 up to now, that there has been some sustained growth in this particular margin globally. And so if you look, but the growth hasn't been that massive. In fact, it's annual basis is less than 1% on annual basis. So yes, for Ghana to still maintain this important place in Africa, I mean, in the sub-Saharan Africa, I think is something we have to commend ourselves. And I think some policies might have worked to our favor, because there are two things that actually will help, in every nation to succeed in terms of power penetration, access to finance, and then prudent policies. And I think probably Ghana has done well in these areas. Yes, affordability is key, and in fact, that is also key to penetration. If energy is available and it's not affordable, it will still impact the penetration rate. So in this triangle that I talked about, energy has to be accessible, affordable, and then dependable. If these three things meet, and I think a country will then have complete energy security. But as we speak now, I think Ghana is not all that competitive in terms of per kilowatt hour the end user pays. Albert, we've still been able to achieve this penetration. And it also means that if we're able to do our homework well and improve in all the value streams, the three key value stream areas where we can improve, I think we can even do better in terms of our penetration rate.
Now let's take some money tips on Money Lab.
Hi there, my name is Benjamin Opokuwari from Alliance Life Insurance. Welcome to Money Lab. In our previous episode, we talked about the claims process. On this episode, we'll be talking about some of the documents you will generally need to process a non-life insurance claim. For a non-life or general insurance, you will need an identity card from the third-party claimant. You also need a completed claim form from the insured. You will need a driver's license of the insured. You will need a police report, depending on the circumstance, or estimate of the damage or the claim. You may also need picture of the damaged item. You may also need a fire service report or a medical report. Remember, you don't need all the documents mentioned, just a few depending on the claim. Thank you once again for joining Money Lab. See you in the next episode.
And that's all we have in way of Prime Business tonight. But we have more business news when you log on to myjoyonline.com. I am Beverly Broohm, and I leave you with news making headlines on the international front.
The business segment was brought to you by